My name is Lillian, and I'm 58 years old, and I thought my daughter was finally making amends when she handed me a plane ticket to Hawaii. For most of my adult life, my world revolved around my daughter, Alina. She was the kind of child who demanded attention from the moment she could talk, bright, strong-willed, always a little too sharp for her own good. But as she grew older, something changed between us. After her father, Robert, walked out when she was just 12, the warmth in her eyes turned into something harder. Resentment. I did everything I could to fill the void he left behind, working 2 jobs, attending every school play, every graduation, trying to be both mother and father, but somehow, nothing was ever enough. When Alina turned 27, we barely spoke except through occasional text messages. She had her own apartment in the city and a life that didn't include me. I'd retired from teaching high school English a few months before, and retirement wasn't what I thought it would be. The silence of my house gnawed at me. No papers to grade, no students to mentor, just the sound of the refrigerator humming and the endless ticking of the kitchen clock. So when Alina called one morning, asking if she could come over, I was surprised and a little hopeful. She hadn't visited in months. I spent the whole morning cleaning, baking her favorite lemon muffins, and trying to convince myself this meant we were finally reconnecting. When she arrived, she looked different, sleek, confident, wearing a crisp white blazer and red lipstick that made her look older than she was. I tried not to stare, but she seemed almost like a stranger standing in my doorway. She smiled, the corners of her lips tight, and handed me an envelope. "Here," she said. "I got you something." Inside was a glossy airline ticket. Honolulu, Hawaii. Departure. Next week. My breath caught. "A trip?" I asked, my voice trembling. She nodded, sitting down at the table. "You've been stuck here too long, Mom. You need a change of scenery. Some peace. You deserve it." It sounded thoughtful. Too thoughtful. Alina wasn't known for gestures like this. I smiled, trying not to cry. "A one-way ticket?" I asked. "You're not coming with me?" She laughed softly. "No, Mom, you're going to relax. Forget about the past for a while. You can stay as long as you want. I already booked you a hotel for the first week. Just go. Enjoy yourself." Her words should have felt comforting, but something in her tone didn't match her smile. I brushed it off, though. Maybe she was just uncomfortable showing affection. Maybe this was her awkward way of saying she cared. We spent the rest of the afternoon chatting about small things, weather, work, her new promotion. I tried to steer the conversation toward us, toward healing, but every time I mentioned the past, she tensed. I noticed her checking her phone repeatedly, scrolling, replying to messages, almost impatient for the visit to end. Still, that night after she left, I sat on my couch clutching that ticket like it was a promise. A promise that maybe, just maybe, my daughter still loved me. Over the next few days, I told my friends at the community center about the trip. Some were thrilled for me. Others raised their eyebrows when I said it was a one-way ticket. "That's strange, isn't it?" my neighbor Patty said. "Usually people get round trips." I laughed it off. "Oh, Alina said I could stay as long as I wanted. Maybe it's just open-ended." But later that night, when I checked my email for the hotel confirmation she'd promised to send, there was nothing. I sent her a message asking for details, but she didn't reply. The next morning, she called, sounding distracted. "Don't worry about the hotel, Mom," she said quickly. "It's all taken care of. Just pack what you need and go enjoy yourself. Okay?" "Okay," I said softly, though my stomach tightened. I started packing light dresses, sunscreen, my old straw hat from when Robert and I went on our honeymoon decades ago. It felt almost poetic, returning to the islands where our marriage began, even if he was long gone. But as I zipped up my suitcase, I noticed Alina watching me from the doorway. She'd come by unannounced again, claiming she wanted to make sure I had everything. Her arms were folded, her expression unreadable. "You don't have to do this," I told her gently. "You can still come with me. We could make it a mother-daughter trip." Her lips twitched in a faint smile. "No, Mom. This is your trip. There was a chill in her voice that made me pause. She leaned against the doorframe, watching me with those same calculating eyes Robert used to have when he was about to say something cruel. "You sure you'll be okay on your own?" she asked. "I'll be fine," I replied, forcing a smile. "Thank you, sweetheart. This means a lot." She nodded slowly, still staring at the suitcase. Later, after she left, I stood by the window and watched her car pull out of the driveway. Her taillights disappeared down the street, and I felt a strange hollowness settle in my chest. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't quite name it. I told myself I was overthinking, that motherhood had made me paranoid. But deep down, a small voice whispered that Alina's kindness felt like a performance. Still, I pushed the thought away. I wanted to believe this was her way of saying sorry. I wanted to believe love could look like redemption. I folded the plane ticket neatly and tucked it into my purse. Unaware that it wasn't a gift at all, it was the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. As I packed my suitcase, I noticed something in her eyes that didn't look like love, it looked like relief. The morning of my flight, Alina insisted on driving me to the airport herself. At first, it felt like the old days, like when she used to drive me to the grocery store as a teenager, blasting music and laughing at nothing. But there was no laughter that morning. The car ride was quiet, the air between us heavy. I tried to fill the silence, asking about her work, her friends, her plans for the weekend, but she only gave short, distracted answers. She kept checking her phone every few minutes, her thumbs swiping quickly, her brows furrowed. When I asked who she was texting, she said, "Just work stuff," and put the phone face down. Something about her tone made me stop asking questions. I stared out the window as we drove through the city, the early sunlight painting everything gold. I tried to convince myself this was a new chapter, maybe a chance to rest, to think, to forgive. But there was a sharp ache in my chest that wouldn't let me breathe easily. When we reached the airport, Alina parked near the departure gate and helped me unload my single suitcase. She looked impeccable, as always, not a hair out of place. I noticed how she didn't seem emotional at all, no tears, no warmth, just that polite, distant expression she'd perfected over the years. "Well," I said, forcing a smile, "I guess this is goodbye for a little while." "Yeah," she replied softly. "You'll have a great time, Mom. You really deserve it." There was something about the way she said deserve that felt final. I searched her face for a clue, something that would reassure me, but all I found was exhaustion and maybe a flicker of guilt. I reached out and hugged her, pulling her close. She hugged back, stiff at first, then tighter, much tighter. "Take care of yourself, okay?" I whispered. She nodded, her chin resting on my shoulder. Then she said quietly, "You'll thank me one day." The words froze me. I stepped back to look at her, confused. "Thank you for what?" She just smiled a small, tight smile and said, "For finally letting go." I wanted to ask what she meant, but she was already turning away, heading back to the car. I stood there watching her go, her figure shrinking with each step, until she disappeared into the flow of traffic. My hand lingered in the air long after she'd gone, as if I could still stop her. The airport buzzed with life, families reuniting, couples hugging, children running, but I felt completely alone. I told myself she probably meant I'd thank her for encouraging me to take a break, but the way she said it didn't sound like that. Still, I pushed the unease aside and went through security, clutching my passport like a lifeline. The flight was long but beautiful. I remember looking out the window as the ocean came into view, endless blue stretching to the horizon. For a brief moment, I felt peace. Maybe this really would be good for me. When the plane landed, I smiled at the sight of palm trees swaying outside the terminal. The air smelled different, fresh, salty, alive. I wheeled my suitcase through the airport, following signs toward baggage claim, expecting to find someone holding a sign or maybe a shuttle driver from the hotel Alina mentioned. But there was no one. I pulled out my phone and checked my email again. No message from her. No confirmation. No address. Nothing. My chest tightened. I called her phone. Straight to voicemail. "Hi, honey," I said, trying to sound calm. "I'm here," But I can't find any of the hotel info. Can you text it to me? No response. I waited 10 minutes. Then 20. I called again. Still voicemail. A woman nearby noticed my worried expression. Are you okay, ma'am? She asked. I smiled weakly. Yes, just waiting on my daughter to send me some details. She nodded kindly and walked off, but I could feel her glance back at me once, like she knew something I didn't. I sat on a bench in the terminal and pulled out my wallet. I figured I could just grab a cab and book a hotel myself for the night. I tried to pay for a coffee first, but my card was declined. I frowned and tried again. Declined. That can't be right, I murmured. I'd checked my account just before leaving. I still had plenty in savings. Maybe it was the card reader. I opened my banking app, expecting to see the usual numbers, but instead, I saw zeros. My checking account, my savings, even my small retirement deposit all gone. Completely empty. At first, I thought it was some sort of system glitch. I refreshed the app. Nothing changed. I felt my throat tighten as panic surged through me. My fingers trembled as I redialed Alina's number, again and again, but it never rang, straight to voicemail every time. Finally, I sat there staring at my phone screen until everything around me blurred. People moved past me in a rush, laughter, luggage wheels, chatter, all of it fading into static. Then, a cold, horrifying thought crept into my mind. I opened my email one more time, praying for anything from her, and that's when I saw it. A new message had just arrived, from Alina. My hands shook as I clicked it open. It was only one sentence long. You'll be better off there. Don't come back. For a long time, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. That's when I checked my bank account and found it completely empty. My daughter hadn't sent me on a vacation, she had sent me away. The realization hit like a rip current, pulling me under before I could gasp for air. I sat frozen on that airport bench in Honolulu, clutching my phone so tightly my knuckles went white. People were walking past me, tourists with leash around their necks, families laughing, honeymooners snapping selfies, and I wanted to scream at all of them. To tell them I didn't belong here. I wasn't supposed to be in paradise. I was supposed to be home. After a few minutes, I forced myself to stand. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I dragged my suitcase toward a cafe in the terminal, hoping that maybe a cup of coffee would steady me enough to think. When I tried to pay again, my card was declined a second time. I apologized to the barista and fumbled for the few crumpled bills I had in my wallet, barely enough for a coffee and a small sandwich. I sat by the window, sipping the coffee with trembling hands. My phone screen glowed in front of me. That email, you'll be better off there. Don't come back. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. It didn't even sound like Alina. It sounded cold, calculated. I dialed her number again. Straight to voicemail. I called twice more. Nothing. Then I tried to text her, asking if she was okay. If this was some kind of joke. My messages showed as delivered. But she didn't reply. Finally, I called my bank. The woman on the other end spoke in that calm, rehearsed tone that made everything sound routine until I told her my entire balance was gone. Let me just check, ma'am, she said. I waited, my pulse pounding in my ears. After a pause, she said, all transfers appear to have been authorized using your credentials. Multiple transactions were made yesterday, wire transfers and account closures. What? I whispered. No, I didn't authorize anything. I understand, ma'am, but the system shows verified login from your home IP address. My blood ran cold. From my home. She asked if I wanted to freeze the remaining linked accounts. I said yes, though I already knew there was nothing left to freeze. When the call ended, I sat there, numb. Alina had done this. She had to have. Who else had access to my computer, my banking information, my passwords? I remembered how, a few months ago, she'd offered to help me set up online banking. I'd thought it was sweet, thoughtful even. I was never good with technology, and she'd laughed at how I struggled with security questions. She even said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll remember the passwords for you if you forget." I never realized how literal that promise was. The sound of the airport intercom snapped me back to reality. I had nowhere to go. No hotel booked, no money, no family waiting on the other side of this nightmare. I was a stranger in paradise, stranded. I went to the airline counter, desperate. "Please," I said, my voice shaking. "My daughter sent me here, and I think she stole from me. I need to get back home." The woman behind the desk frowned sympathetically but shook her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your ticket is non-refundable and one-way. If you'd like to purchase a return ticket, I can check prices for you." When she quoted the fare, my heart sank. I didn't even have enough for a motel room, let alone a $1,000 flight back to the mainland. "Maybe you could contact family?" she asked gently. I almost laughed. She is my family. I spent the rest of the day wandering the terminal, too afraid to leave but too ashamed to stay. Every corner of that place felt like it was closing in on me. As the evening rolled in, the bright Hawaiian sun dipped behind the horizon, turning the glass windows gold. The reflection staring back at me looked old, tired, and betrayed. I barely recognized the woman in it. I thought about Alina as a little girl, the way she used to cling to my leg when she was scared. How she'd whisper, "Don't leave me, Mommy." Now she'd done the very thing she once feared. She'd left me. The email burned in my mind like a wound that wouldn't close. "You'll be better off there." Better off where? In a place where I knew no one? In a state thousands of miles from home, with no money, no safety net, no way back. Night settled over the airport. I found a bench and sat down, pulling my coat tighter around me. I hadn't eaten since morning, but the thought of food made me sick. I tried calling the police in my hometown, explaining everything, but they told me I'd have to file a report in person. That wasn't an option. I was stuck. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, what did I do to make her hate me this much? Memories flooded back: the arguments, the slammed doors, the years of trying to hold a broken family together after Robert left. Maybe she blamed me for that. Maybe she thought I'd pushed him away. I didn't know. All I knew was that my daughter had orchestrated every detail of this, right down to the gift she claimed was out of love. The airport janitor approached me as I sat crying quietly. He offered a kind smile and asked if I needed help. I shook my head and thanked him. He handed me a bottle of water before walking away. That small gesture nearly broke me. As I stared out at the dark runway lights, a single thought anchored in my mind. I couldn't let her win. I had to find a way to get back. To understand why. But for that night, I was just a mother left behind by her own child, sitting under the artificial lights of a foreign airport, waiting for a miracle that didn't come. And yet, I couldn't even begin to understand why. Hawaii was breathtaking, but I'd never felt more trapped in my life. The next morning, sunlight poured through the airport windows, blindingly bright, indifferent to my misery. Outside, travelers stepped into the island breeze with laughter and excitement, while I sat on a bench that had become my bed for the night. My body ached, and so did my heart. I had about $40 left in cash, barely enough for food and a cheap place to stay. I dragged my suitcase outside and called around to find the most affordable motel I could. After a few rejections, one finally said they had a room small, worn down, but available for a few nights. I took it without hesitation. The taxi ride there was short but painful. As we passed palm trees, turquoise water, and couples holding hands, I felt like I was watching another world, one that didn't include me. The motel was nothing like the dreamy resorts on postcards. The walls were peeling, the curtains stained, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. But at least it had a lock and a bed. I sat on that bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. I felt numb. There's a kind of silence that settles in after betrayal, not just quiet, but hollow. It's the kind of silence that eats away at your sense of reality. How could my own daughter do this? I took out my phone again, hoping for some sign of remorse, some message explaining everything. There was nothing. Her number still went straight to voicemail, and her social media accounts had vanished. Deleted or blocked, I wasn't sure which. Desperate, I called a few of my closest friends back home. My neighbor Patty answered first. "Lillian, where are you? We saw movers at your house today." My heart stopped. "Movers?" I repeated. "Yeah," she said. They said you were relocating. A young woman told me you decided to live in Hawaii full-time. She said you gave her permission to handle the sale. The room tilted. Patty, that woman wasn't me. Oh my God, Patty whispered. She looked just like your daughter. I hung up and sat perfectly still, trying to process what I'd just heard. Alina wasn't just stealing my money, she was stealing my life. I called my bank again, this time demanding to speak to someone from the fraud department. The agent sounded polite but firm as she explained, once again, that all transactions had been authorized. She had my login, I said weakly. She set it up for me months ago. Then technically, ma'am, the woman said. You gave her access voluntarily. That makes it difficult to classify as fraud. Voluntarily. The word stung like a slap. I hung up and sat there shaking, realizing that Alina had planned this meticulously. Every step, every detail. Even the password, a combination of her childhood nickname and my birth year, had been her suggestion. The enormity of it all started to sink in. My home, my savings, my future, all of it was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her last words before I boarded the plane. You'll thank me one day. For what? For erasing me? For replacing me? By the third day, the little cash I had left was nearly gone. I walked along the beach aimlessly, the sun sinking low over the waves. Everyone around me seemed so free, their laughter carried by the wind, while I felt like a ghost haunting paradise. At one point, I sat on a rock overlooking the water and thought about walking into it, just letting it all go. The idea terrified me, but so did the thought of living without purpose. Then, as if fate had heard my despair, an older woman approached. She wore a motel uniform and carried a broom. Her name tag read, Kiana. Ma'am, you okay? She asked softly. I nodded weakly, but my eyes gave me away. She sat beside me without another word. For a few minutes, we just listened to the waves crash. You don't look like someone on vacation, she finally said. I'm not, I admitted. My daughter sent me here, and now I can't go home. Kiana's brow furrowed. That's not right. Nobody deserves that. I told her everything, the ticket, the empty bank account, the house being sold without my consent. She listened silently, her face soft with understanding. After a moment, she said, I clean rooms at the motel where you're staying. I can ask the manager if you can help out for food and a place to sleep until you figure things out. It's not much, but it's something. Her kindness broke something open inside me. I covered my face with my hands and cried not just from fear, but from relief that someone still saw me. That night, Kiana brought me a bowl of soup from the motel kitchen and told me, You're stronger than you think, Lillian. Don't let her win. Her words anchored me when everything else felt like quicksand. But even with that small glimmer of hope, a shadow lingered. My daughter wasn't just cruel, she was cunning. She had thought of everything. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. That this was only the beginning of something darker. It was then I remembered Alina once helped me set up online banking and I'd given her my password. I thought I'd lost my money, but what I really lost was my identity. The following week blurred into one long, sleepless haze. I worked quietly at the motel, folding towels, scrubbing floors, and helping Kiana clean rooms. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me a reason to get out of bed. Every night after my shift, I sat on the small porch outside my room, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan and staring at the stars that blanketed the island sky. They looked so close, close enough to touch, and yet I'd never felt further from home. Kiana checked on me often, asking if I'd had any luck contacting my daughter. I hadn't. Alina's phone number stayed disconnected, her social media gone as if she'd vanished from the earth. But the traces of her cruelty were everywhere in my empty accounts, in the home I no longer had, in the hollow ache that had replaced a mother's trust. One morning, I decided to take control. I borrowed Kiana's laptop and began filing a police report online. I typed everything out: the fake vacation, the stolen funds, the forged relocation lie. But when I submitted it, the response was disheartening. Because Alina was my daughter, and I had voluntarily granted her access to my finances, it wasn't classified as a clear-cut crime. They told me I could pursue civil action, but that required proof, lawyers, and money I didn't have. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. It felt like the system itself was mocking me, punishing me for being too trusting. I refused to give up, though. I called my bank again, this time demanding a full record of transactions. The representative hesitated but eventually agreed to email me the details. When I opened the document, my stomach twisted. There it was, dozens of transfers, all made from my account to another in my own name. My name, but not my signature. Alina had created a secondary identity using my information. She was pretending to be me. I immediately reached out to my pension office, terrified she might have touched that too. They confirmed my worst fear: all correspondence had been redirected to a new address. "You filed a change of address request 2 months ago," the woman said. "Everything's being sent there now." "I didn't do that," I said, my voice trembling. "Can you tell me what address it was changed to?" "I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't disclose that information without proper verification." Verification. The cruelest word in the world when you've been erased. For hours, I sat in silence, my mind spiraling. Alina hadn't just taken my money, she had taken me. She was living as me, answering my mail, handling my affairs. To the outside world, it probably looked like I had retired peacefully to Hawaii, enjoying the sunset and living out my golden years. And back home, she was stepping into my place. I felt a wave of nausea. My house, my quiet little 2-story cottage with the rose garden and the wind chimes, it was hers now. My neighbors probably waved to her, thinking it was all legitimate. That night, I couldn't eat. I just sat on the bed, shaking, staring at the faint glow of the digital clock. How long had she planned this? How long had she pretended to care, all while setting the trap? I thought about the months leading up to the trip. The sudden increase in her visits. Her newfound warmth. The way she'd insisted on helping with my bills. Every moment that had felt like reconciliation was actually preparation for my exile. I wanted to believe this was all Robert's influence, that he'd somehow manipulated her, turned her against me. But deep down, I knew Alina was too intelligent, too calculating. This was her doing. A few days later, Patty called again, whispering as if someone might hear her. "Lillian, I think your daughter's living in your house. She's driving your car, and she told everyone you're staying in Hawaii permanently." My knees went weak. "She what?" "She's redecorating. The furniture's gone. And I saw her walking with a man the other day. Looked older. I think it was Robert." Hearing his name again after all these years was like being stabbed in the chest. Robert, the man who left me with nothing but debt and a heart full of blame. Could it really be him? Patty hesitated. "I didn't want to tell you, but they looked close. Like more than father and daughter close." I felt sick. I wanted to scream that it wasn't possible, but a dark, logical part of me knew better. Robert had always been selfish, manipulative. He'd charmed his way through life with easy smiles and hollow promises, and Alina, she'd always wanted his approval. I ended the call and sat motionless for a long time. The pieces were fitting together horribly, perfectly. Maybe Alina hadn't acted alone. Maybe this was something they'd planned together, a cruel, calculated scheme to take everything I'd worked for. For the next few days, I couldn't stop imagining them: Robert sitting in my kitchen, sipping coffee from my mug, Alina laughing at his jokes. My entire life turned into their playground. The anger that had been buried under grief began to rise. I'd spent my whole life protecting Alina, forgiving her, excusing her cruelty because she was my child. But now, I realized that what she'd done wasn't just a betrayal, it was annihilation. She didn't want to hurt me, she wanted to erase me. That night, as rain pattered softly against the motel window, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to vanish quietly. If Alina wanted to erase me, she was about to find out how impossible that was. If Alina wanted to erase me, she was about to find out how impossible that was. I had nothing, no money, no ID, no way home, but I wasn't done fighting. The morning after that realization, I woke up with a single, burning purpose. Grief had turned to fuel. If Alina wanted to strip me of my identity, I'd reclaim it piece by piece. I refused to be the ghost she'd tried to make me. Kiana noticed the change in me right away. "You've got that fire in your eyes again," she said as we changed sheets in one of the motel rooms. "Maybe," I said quietly. "I just need to figure out where to start." She handed me a bottle of water and pointed at her small office in the corner. "Start there. Use my computer. Let's get you your life back." Her kindness nearly brought me to tears again. It had been weeks since I'd felt seen by anyone. I sat at the computer and began researching what to do when your identity is stolen. It was overwhelming pages of government forms, endless verification steps, all of which required the very things I no longer had: money, proof, and stability. Still, I didn't give up. I found the website for the U.S. Embassy in Honolulu and called the number listed for emergency assistance. After waiting on hold for nearly an hour, a soft-spoken woman answered. "I need help," I told her. "My daughter stole my identity, my money, everything. I can't get home." She listened patiently, then said, "You're not the first person to go through something like this, ma'am. If you still have your passport, that's your lifeline." I froze. My passport, I hadn't even thought to check. I scrambled through my suitcase, and there it was, tucked safely in the side pocket where Alina had told me to put it. For the first time in days, I actually smiled. The embassy official instructed me on the steps to verify my identity and report the fraud formally. It wasn't fast, but it was something. I spent hours typing statements, printing screenshots, and filing claims. Kiana stood beside me, refilling my coffee every time my energy began to fade. As the days turned into weeks, I settled into a strange routine: mornings, cleaning rooms, afternoons building my case. I even started keeping a journal. I wrote down every detail I could remember: the date Alina gave me the ticket, the email she sent, every bank transaction, every person who'd seen her back home. Kiana would often find me late at night, still at the computer. "You're like a detective," she teased gently. "Maybe I am," I said, "because the police sure don't seem interested." She laughed softly, but her eyes were serious. "Sometimes, justice starts with us." That sentence stuck with me. A week later, I got a call from a small Honolulu law firm. Apparently, the embassy had referred my case to them after hearing my story. The attorney, a young woman named Leah, offered to meet me in person. When she arrived, I half expected judgment, a pitying smile, maybe even disbelief. Instead, she listened like someone who cared. She took notes, asked sharp questions, and never once doubted my story. "Your daughter's actions fall under both financial fraud and identity theft," she said finally. "The challenge is that family cases are tricky. But we can build a case if you have documentation." I handed her a folder stuffed with everything I'd gathered. She looked through it carefully, then nodded. "You've done more legwork than most people who come to us. That's good. We'll start from here." Her confidence gave me strength I didn't know I still had. Over the next month, Leah helped me file the official reports, freeze what few remaining assets were in my name, and begin the slow process of restoring my identity. She warned me it could take years, but I didn't care. I had already survived the worst part, losing my daughter. During that time, Kiana became like family. We ate dinner together every night, sharing stories about our lives. She'd lost her husband years ago and understood what loneliness felt like. Sometimes, when I told her about Alina as a little girl, the bedtime stories, the piano recitals, the birthday parties, I worked overtime to afford, she'd hold my hand quietly. "She must have been hurting too, to do something like that," Kiana said one night. "Maybe," I admitted. "But that doesn't make it right." By the end of that month, I had a small spark of hope again. The world hadn't completely abandoned me. I was finding allies in unexpected places. Then one afternoon, while helping Kiana clean one of the rooms, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. It was from Patty, my neighbor back home. The subject line read, "You need to see this." My heart raced as I opened it. Inside was a single sentence. "I thought you should know who's living in your house." Below, it was a photo attachment. When I clicked on it, my blood ran cold. There, standing in my living room, was my daughter, Alina, smiling. But she wasn't alone. Beside her was a man I hadn't seen in 15 years. A man I once thought I'd never have to see again. Robert, my ex-husband. They were holding champagne glasses, toasting in front of my fireplace, my home, as if celebrating something. My hands trembled as I stared at the image. Everything around me faded until there was only that picture, and the sickening realization that this betrayal went even deeper than I'd imagined. Alina hadn't just stolen my money or my name. She'd joined forces with the one person who had broken us both. But just as things were stabilizing, I received an unexpected email from my neighbor back home with a photo attached. In the photo, my daughter wasn't alone in my house, she was with a man I knew too well. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. The man standing beside Alina, his arm casually draped around her shoulders, was unmistakable. Robert. My ex-husband. The man who had walked out of our lives 15 years ago, leaving me to pick up the pieces. I zoomed in on the photo as if clarity would make it less horrifying. But there was no mistake. It was him, same confident grin, same arrogant posture. Only now, streaks of gray touched his hair. And Alina, she looked radiant, alive, happy. Happier than I'd seen her in years. They were in my living room. My living room. My framed photos were gone from the mantel, replaced by fresh flowers and expensive decor. The champagne glasses glistened in their hands as if they were toasting to their victory. I could barely breathe. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was a partnership. My daughter and my ex-husband, reunited in deceit. Kiana noticed the blood drain from my face and rushed over. What is it? I handed her the phone wordlessly. She stared for a long moment before whispering, "That's her father?" "Yes," I said, the word coming out more like a sob. "He left when she was 12. I raised her alone. And now..." My voice broke. I felt the years of struggle, sacrifice, and sleepless nights collapsing around me. Every decision I'd ever made for that child suddenly felt like a mistake. Kiana sat beside me, her hand resting gently on mine. "You said he was controlling, right?" "More than that," I said bitterly. "Robert always needed to be in charge of the money, the choices, the image. When I divorced him, I thought I was finally free. But somehow, he found a way back in through her. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of them together haunted me. The idea that Alina had chosen him, the man who abandoned us over me, felt like a knife twisting deeper with every breath. By morning, I knew I needed to act. I forwarded the photo to Leah, the attorney who had been helping me, and begged her to look into Robert. If he was involved, this wasn't just identity theft, it was a conspiracy. Leah called back within hours. "Lillian, I think you're right. If your ex-husband helped her, we can expand the case. I'll need more documentation, but that photo is a strong start." She asked if I still had Robert's old contact information. I did, buried in an old notebook I'd kept more out of habit than hope. Leah told me to send her everything. As soon as I hung up, I opened my laptop again and began searching. Robert hadn't been on social media for years, but I found something: a recent listing for a small consulting business registered under his name. The address? My home. My pulse raced. He wasn't just visiting. He was living there. I sent the discovery to Leah, who immediately reached out to the police to open an investigation into financial fraud and impersonation. But she warned me that it would take time, especially since the suspects were in another state. Time. That was the cruelest part. Every day I waited felt like another day they got to enjoy what was mine. I kept staring at that photo, the way Alina leaned into him, the pride on Robert's face. It was almost too much to bear. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was emotional. Psychological. My own blood had chosen the very man who'd destroyed our family. That night, I decided to call my home number. I don't even know why, maybe just to hear the answering machine, to feel close to what was once mine. It rang twice before someone answered. "Hello?" My breath caught. The voice was male, calm, practiced, unmistakable. "Robert?" I whispered. A pause. Then, a chuckle. "Lillian, didn't expect to hear from you." Every muscle in my body went rigid. "What are you doing in my house?" "Your house," he said mockingly. "You sold it, remember? You said you were moving to Hawaii. I never said that, I shouted. You know I didn't. There was another pause. Then he lowered his voice and said, Well, the paperwork says otherwise. I have the deed, the keys, and the blessing of your daughter. Seems pretty official to me. I could hear Alina's voice faintly in the background laughing. I felt the phone slip from my hands. Kiana rushed over, catching it before it hit the ground. My entire body shook with rage and disbelief. Robert picked the line back up. Tell you what, Lillian, enjoy the beaches. You always said you wanted peace. Now you've got it. Then he hung up. The silence that followed was unbearable. I sat on the floor, staring at nothing, tears streaming down my face. Kiana crouched beside me, her face hard with anger. You have proof now, she said. You have voices, names, everything. You're going to take it all back. She was right. The fear that had once paralyzed me now turned into something sharper, a deep, burning fury. I wiped my tears and looked at her. Then let's make sure they never get away with this. But when I called my home number, a voice answered, and it was Robert pretending to be me. Hearing my own husband impersonate me on the phone was the moment I snapped. That call flipped a switch inside me. All the pain, confusion, and disbelief that had weighed me down for weeks burned away, replaced by something cold and clear determination. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to fight. Kiana found me the next morning sitting at the motel's tiny breakfast bar with my journal open, filling page after page with notes. She placed a cup of coffee beside me and said, You look like a woman on a mission. I am, I said. If the police won't take this seriously, then I'll make the better world listen. Kiana arched an eyebrow. And how exactly are you going to do that? By telling my story. She smiled faintly, uncertain. To who? To everyone who will hear it. That day, Kiana introduced me to her friend Melina, a local journalist who wrote human interest stories for a small Honolulu paper. Melina was sharp, empathetic, and curious, exactly the kind of person who didn't look away when something was wrong. When she arrived at the motel, I told her everything from the beginning. The fake ticket, the empty bank accounts, the stolen house, the phone call. By the end, her pen was flying across her notepad. This isn't just family drama, she said. This is exploitation and identity theft. We could help you get attention, real attention. The thought of the public knowing my shame made me nauseous at first. I didn't want to be that woman, the one whose own child betrayed her. But Melina's eyes were kind when she said, Stories like yours help others. There are people out there living the same nightmare. So, I agreed. We recorded an interview at the motel. I sat in a plastic chair with the ocean breeze drifting through the open window and told my story. My voice trembled at first, but the more I spoke, the stronger it became. I described every detail: Alina's false kindness, her calculated plan, Robert's reappearance. I didn't hold back. When Melina finished editing the piece, she asked if I was ready to publish it. I nodded. Let them see who I really am. Within 2 days, the story was online. The headline read, Mother stranded in Hawaii after daughter's cruel scheme. It spread faster than I expected. First, the local news picked it up, then bigger outlets. Within a week, I was receiving messages from strangers, people who had been tricked by family, people who had lost everything and rebuilt. Some donated to the GoFundMe Melina had set up for me. Others just sent words of kindness and solidarity. For the first time since arriving in Hawaii, I felt hope again. The donations gave me enough to buy food, pay for legal documents, and even start saving toward a ticket home. Then, one evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I knew the voice immediately. Mom, Alina hissed. My chest tightened. Alina, you ruined everything, she screamed. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? What I've done to you? I said, my voice shaking with disbelief. You stole my money, my home, my identity. You left me stranded thousands of miles away with nothing, she scoffed. I did you a favor. You were miserable. Always lonely and bitter. I gave you a chance to start over. My heart pounded. By destroying me? You don't get it, she snapped. Dad said I cut her off. Don't you dare bring him into this. He helped me, she said proudly. He said you'd always stand in the way, that you'd never let me live my own life. We took what was ours. The words hit harder than any slap. I'd spent my whole life protecting her, sacrificing everything, and she still saw me as an obstacle. Alina, I said softly, you've broken the law. You need to turn yourself in before it gets worse. She laughed, a cold, hollow sound that didn't belong to the girl I'd raised. You think anyone's going to believe you over me? You're the crazy old woman crying about her daughter. No one cares. I felt something inside me snap again, not in anger this time, but in clarity. Actually, I said, a lot of people care. Thousands, in fact. The story's already out there. There was silence on the other end. Then she whispered, you wouldn't. Oh, I already did. The call ended with a click. I sat there shaking, adrenaline coursing through my veins. That one conversation had given me something invaluable proof. Melina had asked to record any new developments, and the call had been captured in full. I immediately sent the audio file to Leah, my attorney. She responded within minutes. This changes everything. We now have evidence of admission and intent. For the first time, the balance of power began to shift. Leah contacted the authorities in my home state, forwarding every piece of evidence we'd gathered, the bank transfers, the photo of Alina and Robert, and now the recorded confession. A warrant request was filed. But even as the legal process began moving forward, I felt uneasy. Alina had always been unpredictable. If she knew I was building a case against her, she wouldn't go quietly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring out at the waves breaking under the moonlight. My mind caught between fear and relief. Kiana came by and placed a hand on my shoulder. You did it, she whispered. You're fighting back. I know, I said softly. But I don't think she's done yet. And that's when Alina finally called me furious that I'd made her look bad. You ruined everything, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. The sound of Alina's fury still echoed in my head hours after the call ended. I sat in the quiet of my motel room, my hands still shaking. For years, I had imagined her voice filled with pride, laughter, love, anything but hatred. Yet now, every syllable she spoke dripped with venom, as if I were her enemy. When I told Kiana what happened, she frowned deeply. She sounds cornered, she said. People like that lash out when they lose control. Kiana was right. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the powerless one. I had proof. I had people on my side. And that terrified Alina. Still, part of me ached. That was my daughter on the other end of the line, the little girl who used to braid my hair, who used to beg me to sing her to sleep. I never imagined she'd grow into someone who could sound so cruel. That night, I replayed the recorded call for Leah, my attorney. Over speakerphone, we listened together to every poisonous word Alina spat. When it ended, Leah exhaled sharply. This is perfect, she said. You have a clear admission that she and Robert worked together and that she knows she took your money. I'll forward this to the authorities and to the prosecutor's office. It's more than enough to open a criminal investigation. Her voice gave me strength. For weeks, I'd been surviving on nothing but fear and stubbornness. Now, for the first time, justice felt possible. But Alina wasn't finished. The next day, I woke to a barrage of messages from an unknown number. They came one after another, insults, accusations, and even threats. You made me look like a monster. Dad's furious. You'll regret this. If you come home, I swear you'll regret it. I read them all in silence, my stomach twisting. Then I screenshot every single one and sent them to Leah. She replied immediately. Good. Keep documenting everything. This strengthens your case. Later that afternoon, I received another message, this one from an email I didn't recognize. The subject line said, You think you've won? I hesitated before opening it. Inside were photos, pictures of my home, my garden, my car, all from different angles, as if someone had been documenting every inch of my life. The final image made my heart stop. It was a close-up of my wedding photo, The one that used to hang in the hallway. The glass was shattered. And across the bottom, someone had scrawled the words, "It's over." My knees went weak. I dropped the phone and covered my mouth, trembling. Kiana came running when she heard me gasp. "What happened?" she asked. Kneeling beside me, I showed her the screen, and she went pale. "This isn't just revenge anymore," she said. "This is obsession." She was right. This wasn't just about money or control, this was personal. Alina didn't just want to take what I had. She wanted me to suffer. I called Leah again, and she immediately forwarded everything to the police. "This crosses the line into harassment and intimidation," she said. "We'll add it to the report." For the rest of that day, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept thinking about that broken picture frame, a symbol of everything Robert had destroyed, and now, what Alina was continuing. That evening, my phone rang again. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mom," Alina said, her voice eerily calm this time. "You need to stop this." "I'm not stopping anything," I replied, my voice steady. "You made your choices. You think they'll believe you?" she sneered. "I'm your daughter. I can say you're unstable, that you're making things up. You're halfway across the ocean. Alone. Who do you think they'll trust?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself not to scream. "They'll trust the evidence," I said. "Your words, the bank records, the photos. And that recording." Silence. Then, a soft, trembling laugh. "You recorded me?" "Yes," I said coldly. "And it's already with the police." Her breathing quickened. You can't do this to me, Mom." I almost felt pity then, almost. "You did this to yourself," I whispered. "You and your father." Her tone shifted, frantic. "He said this would work. He said you'd never fight back. You were supposed to what?" I interrupted. "Disappear?" There was a pause. Then, a broken whisper. "You don't understand, Mom," he promised. But before she could finish, the line went dead. I sat there, clutching the phone, heart hammering. There it was, the truth. She had admitted it. Robert had orchestrated everything, and Alina, blinded by her need for his approval, had followed him into the fire. When I told Leah about the call, she sounded both relieved and furious. "That's all we need," she said. "Her confession connects Robert directly. The case is airtight now." Within days, she contacted me with the news. The authorities had issued warrants for both Alina and Robert on charges of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. I expected to feel triumphant, but instead, I felt hollow. How could victory feel so much like loss? Kiana sat beside me as I stared out at the darkening ocean that night. "You did it," she said gently. "You fought back." "I know," I said softly. "But she's still my daughter." Kiana nodded, her voice full of compassion. "And sometimes, love hurts more than hate ever could." I turned my gaze back to the horizon, the waves crashing endlessly against the shore. Somewhere out there, my daughter was falling deeper into a mess she'd made, and for the first time, she was the one running scared. But Alina wasn't going to surrender quietly. When I stepped off the plane back home, she was already waiting for me. It had been nearly 3 months since I'd last seen my daughter's face in person. As I walked through the terminal, heart pounding, I spotted her near the exit, leaning against a pillar. Her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The last time I saw her, she was smiling as she handed me a one-way ticket to Hawaii. Now, her smile was gone, replaced with something that looked almost like fear. My attorney, Leah, had arranged for law enforcement to meet me at the airport. The moment I'd landed, I'd been told that Alina and Robert were both under investigation, and that arrests were imminent. But Alina, she wanted to see me first. She'd begged through her lawyer for one last meeting before things got out of hand. Against my better judgment, I agreed, not because I owed her anything, but because I needed to look her in the eyes and ask why. As I approached her, she straightened up, forcing a half-hearted smirk. "You look different," she said. "Hawaii must have suited you." I ignored the jab. You stole my life, I said quietly. My home, my money, my name. Why, Alina? Why would you do that to me? She shrugged, but her eyes darted away. You wouldn't understand. Then help me, I pressed. Make me understand. For a moment, I thought she might actually explain, but instead she crossed her arms tighter. Dad said you'd never forgive me, she muttered. He said you'd never let me live how I wanted. He promised he'd fix everything that we could start over without you dragging us down. The words hit hard. I had spent years carrying the guilt of that broken marriage, wondering if I'd ruined her childhood by divorcing Robert. But now, hearing her parrot his manipulation, I realized how deep his poison had gone. Dragging you down, I repeated. Alina, I raised you alone. I gave up everything so you could have a good life. He abandoned us and you sided with him. She looked at me, then really looked, and for a second, her eyes glistened. He said you'd never let me go, she whispered. That you'd always try to control me. Control you? I asked, my voice rising. You mean I wanted to protect you? From him? From this? Alina turned away, wiping her face quickly. You don't get it, Mom. You're always the victim, aren't you? Always the one who suffers while everyone else looks like the villain. Her voice was breaking, but her pride wouldn't let her stop. I didn't want to hurt you, she said. I just wanted to start over. He told me if we took the money, we could finally have a life. A family. One that worked this time. I stared at her, stunned. He told you that? She nodded weakly. Alina, I said slowly. You do realize he's using you again, don't you? He used me for years. Then he walked away when he got what he wanted. And now he's doing it to you. She opened her mouth to argue but hesitated. For the first time, I saw it, the uncertainty behind her anger. She was realizing the truth. Before I could say more, a pair of officers approached us. Leah had arrived as well, her face composed but firm. Lillian, she said softly, it's time. Alina's eyes widened when she saw the officers. Wait, what's happening? You know what's happening, Leah replied. You and Robert are being charged with multiple counts of financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. No! Alina cried, backing away. No, this isn't how it's supposed to go. The officers stepped forward, gently but firmly taking her by the arms. She turned to me, eyes wide with panic. Mom, please, don't let them take me. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Dad said. Stop. I said quietly. Tears stinging my eyes. Stop blaming him. You knew what you were doing. She shook her head desperately. I was trying to make things right. How does destroying me make anything right? I whispered. Her lips quivered, but no sound came out. The officers began reading her rights. As they led her away, she twisted her neck to look back at me. Her face a mixture of fury and heartbreak. You ruined my life, she screamed. You could have just stayed there. You had paradise, but you had to come back and destroy everything. I stood frozen as her voice echoed through the terminal. People were staring, but I didn't care. My heart felt like glass shattering in my chest. I had wanted justice, and I'd gotten it, but at a cost I could barely bear. Leah put a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said gently. Then why does it feel so wrong? I whispered. Because despite everything, despite the lies and betrayal, Alina was still my daughter. And no mother ever dreams of seeing her child in handcuffs. As the police car drove away, I caught a glimpse of her, through the tinted window. Her head was bowed, her shoulders trembling. I pressed my palm against the glass of the airport window, whispering to no one in particular, I'm sorry. But sorry didn't change what she'd done. Sorry didn't undo the months of pain or the years of manipulation. Sorry couldn't bring back the life she'd stolen. The sun was setting as I walked out of the airport with Leah and Kiana beside me. The orange sky glowed like fire, reflecting off the glass doors, a reminder that even the most beautiful things can burn. Yet, deep down, a mother's heart doesn't stop breaking even for the child who betrayed her. The courtroom felt colder than I expected, colder than Hawaii's loneliest nights. It had been 6 months since Alina's arrest, and every day between then and now felt like a blur of paperwork, statements, and long sleepless nights. The media had picked up the story again once the charges became public. Mother versus daughter, a family torn apart by fraud, the headlines said. I didn't recognize myself in the photos. They printed my hair streaked with gray, my eyes dull with exhaustion. But maybe that was who I had become, someone aged by heartbreak. The day of the trial, I arrived early with Leah. The courthouse was quiet, solemn. I sat in the wooden pews, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, trying to steady my breathing. Across the room, Alina sat beside her lawyer. She looked smaller somehow, fragile, dressed in a simple navy suit. Her once perfect hair hung limp, her eyes sunken. And then I saw him, Robert. Still arrogant, still perfectly groomed, still pretending to be the smartest man in the room. He wouldn't even look at me as he whispered something to Alina's lawyer. My stomach turned at the sight of them together, side by side again. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The clerk began reading the charges. Multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, financial conspiracy, and emotional coercion. Hearing the words aloud felt surreal, like someone was reading a tragedy written about someone else. But this wasn't fiction. This was my life. The prosecution began with the evidence I had spent months collecting: the forged bank transfers, the email from Alina, the photos Patty had sent me, and the recording of Alina's confession. When the clip played in the courtroom, I couldn't bear to look at her. Her voice filled the air, trembling with anger as she said, "Dad said you'd never let me live how I wanted. We took what was ours." A few people in the audience gasped softly. I stared down at my folded hands, trying not to cry. Then came my turn to testify. Leah squeezed my arm before I walked to the stand. "Just tell your truth," she whispered. I took the oath, sat down, and tried to find my voice. It trembled at first, but I pushed through it. I told them everything, from the day Alina handed me that plane ticket, to the sleepless nights stranded in Hawaii, to the moment I realized my own daughter had plotted to erase me. As I spoke, I saw Alina's face tighten. Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't name: guilt, shame, or maybe just exhaustion from keeping up her lies. Robert, on the other hand, sat motionless, his jaw set, as if he were above all of it. The prosecutor asked me what hurt the most. I paused for a long time before answering. "It wasn't losing my money," I said quietly. "Or even my house. It was realizing that the little girl I raised, the one who used to hold my hand when she was scared, could look me in the eye and send me away as if I didn't matter." A murmur rippled through the room. My throat ached as I continued. "I didn't want revenge. I wanted understanding. But she made me invisible. And I refused to disappear. When I stepped down from the stand, I avoided looking at Alina. But as I passed her table, I could feel her eyes on me. I didn't turn around. Robert testified next. He tried to paint himself as a victim, claiming Alina acted alone, that he had no idea what she was doing. But the prosecution shredded his story piece by piece. The business registration in my name, the joint account transfers, the forged signatures, they all led back to him. By the time he stepped down, the arrogance had drained from his face. Finally, it was Alina's turn. She stood slowly, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I didn't mean to hurt her," she said. "I just wanted to be free. My father said we could fix things, that it would help her too, that she'd be happy away from all the stress." Her words were hollow, but there was something in her tone, a trace of regret, maybe even disbelief at what she'd become. The prosecutor asked, "Do you understand what you did to your mother?" Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't answer. When closing arguments ended, the judge called for a recess before the verdict. I sat in silence, staring at the floor, numb. An hour later, everyone returned. The jury filed in, their expressions unreadable. The foreman stood and read the verdict. On all counts, guilty. The words echoed through the room. Alina gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. Robert just sat still, eyes blank. As the bailiffs moved forward, Alina turned to look at me one last time. Her lips trembled. "Mom," she whispered, barely audible. I wanted to go to her, I wanted to pull her into my arms and tell her it would be okay, but I couldn't. The mother in me longed to forgive, but the woman she destroyed refused to forget. When the gavel struck, ending the trial, I felt a strange stillness settle over me. Justice had been served, but peace? That was still far away. As I walked out of the courthouse, the cool air hit my face. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted my name. But I didn't stop. I just kept walking. I walked out of court that day free but emptier than ever. Freedom doesn't always feel like peace, sometimes it feels like silence. The weeks after the trial were quiet in a way that unnerved me. The chaos that had consumed my life for nearly a year was suddenly gone, replaced by an emptiness I didn't know how to fill. I was free. Yes, free from the lies, the fear, the uncertainty, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. The authorities had seized my house as part of the restitution process. It took time, but eventually, ownership was returned to me. The day I stepped back through those doors, it felt like walking into someone else's life. Everything looked the same, but nothing was the same. The walls that had once held laughter and arguments now echoed only with memories. I stood in the living room, staring at the faint outline on the wall where my wedding photo used to hang, the one I'd seen shattered in Alina's email. The glass had been replaced, but the crack in my heart hadn't. Neighbors peeked from their windows, unsure whether to say hello. Patty finally approached me with cautious warmth. "It's good to see you home, Lillian," she said. "We missed you." I smiled faintly. I missed me too. I spent the first few days cleaning every inch of the house, as if scrubbing away the traces of what had happened could make it mine again. I found small reminders of Alina everywhere, her handwriting on a note in the kitchen, her perfume lingering on a scarf left behind. Each discovery was a knife twist, equal parts love and loss. Eventually, I gathered her things into boxes. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away, but I couldn't bear to look at them either. They sat stacked in the garage, a shrine to the daughter I once knew. I tried to settle back into a normal routine, but normal felt foreign. I woke each morning expecting another call from Leah or another headline with my name in it. When the days passed quietly, I didn't know what to do with the stillness. That's when I found the community center again. The same one where I'd volunteered before Alina's gift. This time, I went not as a teacher or a helper, but as someone who needed to belong somewhere again. The director, a kind woman named Ruth, welcomed me with open arms. "You've been through hell, Lillian," she said softly. "But you're still standing. Maybe you can help others who've been hurt too." And so I did. Week after week, I started working with women who'd suffered betrayal from lovers, friends, even family. We shared stories, cried, laughed, and healed together. It didn't erase my pain, but it gave it purpose. Each time someone said, "Thank you for listening," I felt a small piece of myself come back. Letters from Alina began to arrive a few months later. The first one was angry, full of blame and bitterness. She accused me of destroying her life, of betraying her to strangers. I almost tore it up. But then I remembered something Kiana once told me. Hurt people hurt others. The next letter came weeks later. It was shorter, softer. She apologized, sort of. "I don't know why I did what I did," she wrote. "Dad made it sound like it would fix everything. Now I see it only broke us worse." I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't know what to say. Forgiveness isn't a letter you can write overnight. Months passed. I redecorated the house, new paint, new curtains, new furniture. I wanted to erase the ghosts, to make it feel like mine again. And slowly, I did. I planted roses in the garden, just like I used to before everything fell apart. The first time they bloomed, I stood there for a long time, breathing in their scent. It was the scent of survival. One morning, I made coffee and sat by the kitchen window. The sunlight spilled across the counter, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel weighed down. My savings were being restored through court restitution, and Leah said more would come in time. For the first time since Hawaii, I felt the faint hum of peace. But healing is rarely linear. It sneaks up on you, and so does the past. A few weeks later, I went to collect the mail, humming softly to myself. There was an envelope with no return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, and careful. I tore it open, expecting another letter from Alina. But inside wasn't a letter. It was a plane ticket. I froze, my pulse quickening. It was a one-way ticket to Hawaii. For a moment, my knees nearly gave out. My mind flooded with memories, the betrayal, the fear, the airport bench where I'd sat alone, wondering how my daughter could send me away. But then I noticed something different. There was a note tucked inside, written in graceful script. "You left something behind. Come when you're ready. Kiana." I sank into a chair, the ticket trembling in my hands. A laugh bubbled up through my tears, soft, broken, but real. Hawaii. The place that once symbolized my exile now felt like an invitation to healing. Then one morning, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a plane ticket. When I saw that ticket, my heart stopped. It was another one-way trip to Hawaii. For a long time, I just sat there at my kitchen table, staring at it. The sunlight poured through the window, illuminating the blue and white print of the destination that had once been my prison. My breath caught as a swirl of emotions washed over me: fear, nostalgia, gratitude, and something else I hadn't felt in a long time: curiosity. I ran my fingers over the edge of the ticket, half expecting it to burn me, half expecting it to vanish, but it was real. There, beneath the travel details, was a small handwritten note from Kiana. "You left something behind. Come when you're ready." I smiled through tears. Trust Kiana to send something like this, thoughtful but mysterious, always knowing the perfect balance between a push and a promise. Still, part of me hesitated. Hawaii wasn't just a place. It was a wound. Every corner of it carried memories of panic, betrayal, and survival. Could I really go back? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, turning the idea over and over in my mind. I thought about the first time I arrived there, scared, broke, and completely alone. Then I thought about the woman I had become since. Someone who had faced down deceit, rebuilt her life, and found purpose again. Maybe returning wouldn't be reopening a scar. Maybe it would be reclaiming my peace. The next morning, I placed the ticket on my dresser, right beside a framed picture of Kiana and me taken the day before I flew home. She had insisted we take it just in case we never see each other again. And now I realized how wrong she'd been. Some bonds can't be broken by distance. I spent the next few weeks preparing, not just practically, but emotionally. I told Leah I was going back, and she smiled. "You deserve closure, Lillian," she said. "Go find it." I also wrote a letter to Alina. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was something close to understanding. "Dear Alina," I wrote, "you hurt me more than anyone ever has. But I still believe there's a part of you worth saving. Maybe one day you'll find it the way I had to find myself. Until then, I hope you remember that even broken things can be mended, if you let them." I didn't send it, but writing it was enough. When the day of my flight came, I packed light, just one suitcase, the same one I had taken before, but this time it wasn't filled with fear, it was filled with choice. At the airport, everything felt eerily familiar. The same sounds, the same smells: coffee brewing, announcements echoing, families rushing by, but I was different. I was no longer the woman who'd been tricked into leaving. I was the woman choosing to return. As the plane soared above the clouds, I looked out the window and whispered to myself, "I'm not running anymore." When we landed, the moment my feet touched Hawaiian soil again, my chest tightened. The humid air wrapped around me like an old memory. I took a deep breath. It smelled of salt and second chances. I grabbed a cab and gave the driver the address of the motel where I had stayed before. My hands trembled slightly as we approached it. The building looked the same: faded paint, flickering sign, but it no longer felt like a place of despair. It felt like a starting point. When I stepped inside, the woman at the front desk turned and gasped. "Lillian?" It was Kiana. She dropped the clipboard she was holding and ran around the counter, pulling me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she said, laughing through tears. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But your ticket convinced me." She grinned. "You left a part of yourself here." I figured it was time you came to collect it. We sat together for hours, talking about everything that had happened, the trial, the aftermath, my new life. Kiana listened quietly, occasionally squeezing my hand. Finally, she said, "You know, Lillian, what happened to you was terrible. But look at you now. You turned pain into purpose. Not many people can do that." Her words made something inside me settle like a knot finally loosening. The next morning, Kiana drove me to the beach. The same one I used to walk when I was stranded. The same spot where I once thought about ending it all. Now, the water looked different. Brighter, calmer. We stood in silence, the waves rolling in and out. I took off my sandals and let the surf lap at my feet. The sensation grounded me, the cool rush of water, the warmth of sunlight on my skin. "I thought I'd hate this place forever," I said softly. Kiana smiled. "Places don't hurt us, Lillian. People do. The place is just waiting for you to see it differently." She was right. Hawaii hadn't betrayed me. My daughter had. The island had only been the stage for my rebirth. I stayed for 2 weeks. I revisited the places that had once terrified me, the cafe where my card had first been declined, the bench where I'd cried in the airport, the tiny room at the motel where I'd planned my comeback. Each visit felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost. By the end of my stay, I no longer felt like a victim of what happened. I felt like the author of what came after. Before I flew home again, Kiana handed me a seashell. "For luck," she said. I smiled, closing my fingers around it. "For closure," I corrected gently. As I packed my bag again, I realized I wasn't running away anymore. I was coming home to myself. When I stepped onto the beach again, the same sun that once mocked me now felt like forgiveness. The sand was warm beneath my feet, and the sound of the waves rolled softly in my ears like a lullaby. I stood there, watching the horizon where the sea kissed the sky, and for the first time in years, I felt no bitterness, only gratitude. I had come back to the very place where my life had fallen apart, and instead of pain, I found peace. Kiana stood beside me, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You still like it black?" she asked with a grin. "Always," I said, smiling as I took one. "Some things never change." We watched the sunrise together in silence. It painted the water gold and pink, a gentle reminder that every ending holds the seed of a new beginning. In the months since my return to Hawaii, I had found a rhythm again. I'd rented a small apartment near the coast, modest but cozy. With Kiana's help, I began volunteering at a local women's shelter, sharing my story with others who had been betrayed, manipulated, or left behind by those they trusted most. The first time I spoke publicly, my hands trembled. I told them about Alina's deceit, Robert's manipulation, and the night I thought I'd never recover. But as I looked out at the faces in the audience, women of all ages, each carrying their own scars, I realized something powerful. Pain was universal, but so was resilience. After the talk, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "I thought I was the only one," she said. I squeezed her hand. "You're never the only one," I told her. "We survive by remembering that we're not alone." Word spread about my story again, not as a scandal this time, but as an inspiration. People started calling me the woman who turned betrayal into bravery. I didn't feel brave, but I understood what they meant. I had taken what was meant to destroy me and turned it into something that could help others heal. Kiana and I soon decided to do more. With a few local donors and the help of Ruth, the woman who ran the community center back home, we started a small nonprofit. We called it Second Light, dedicated to helping victims of family-based financial abuse rebuild their lives. The work filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Every time someone walked through our doors scared, ashamed, uncertain, I saw a reflection of who I once was. And every time they walked out with their head a little higher, I felt a quiet victory. One afternoon, after a long day at the shelter, I sat by the water again, watching the sky turn shades of orange and violet. Kiana joined me, tossing pebbles into the surf. "You ever think about going back to the mainland?" she asked. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "No, I think this is where I was always meant to end up. Maybe I had to lose everything to find where I truly belong." She nodded, understanding. Later that night, back at my apartment, I opened the small wooden box where I kept my most important mementos, my passport, the seashell Kiana gave me, and a folded letter addressed to Alina. It had been over a year since the trial, and she was still serving of her sentence. Sometimes I reread her last letter, the one she wrote after the verdict. It was simple but full of regret. Mom, I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're okay. I hope you found happiness. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. Maybe one day, you can tell me. I traced the handwriting with my fingers. There was pain in her words, but also something else, awareness. She was changing. Slowly. I hadn't written back yet. But that night, I took out a pen and began. Dear Alina, I wrote. I am okay. It took me a long time, but I've found peace. I don't hate you anymore. Hate is heavy, and I've carried enough. I hope you find your own peace too. I'll be here when you're ready to face the world again. I sealed the letter and set it aside, not sure if I'd send it tomorrow or next month or ever. But writing it was enough. The next morning, I walked back to the beach. The tide was low, and the same stretch of shore where I once wept now shimmered under the soft dawn light. I carried a bouquet of white lilies, symbols of renewal, and placed them gently on the sand. This is for the woman I used to be, I whispered. For the one who lost everything, so another could be born. The ocean breeze lifted my hair, carrying my words away into the distance. I closed my eyes and let the warmth of the sun rest on my face. The waves rolled in, touching the lilies before pulling them gently out to sea. Watching them drift away, I felt something inside me finally let go the last thread of anger, the last echo of pain. I smiled. Life had come full circle. The island that once held my tears now held my healing. The water that once threatened to drown me now washed me clean. Because in losing everything, I had found myself again.